Thank you very much. I'll start in French for the sake of linguistic balance. As Vice President Timmermans said, the Commission has indeed adopted a very strong, ambitious plan, one which I really feel is up to the challenge and up to the crisis which we're going through. This crisis is unlike any we've known before. It's a crisis, first of all, which has revealed the great fragilities which perhaps we'd forgotten. Human fragility, the fragile nature of our health, and I think that that flags up other dangers which are linked to the climate change, the destruction of biodiversity, and also the fragility of our economic systems. And finally, the fragility of certain services of our institutions and of our healthcare services. I think that what we are proposing provides a response to these challenges. So, first of all, of course, we do need economic recovery. Perhaps not bringing things back identically to how they were before, but we need to draw on what we've learned throughout the crisis. Jobs are at the heart of our concerns, because if we have so far managed to mitigate the harm to jobs compared to the US, for example, there are nevertheless 30, 40 million people working on a time-limited basis, and the forecast suggests that unemployment will once again reach around 10%. So employment has once again become an absolute priority. And then the second point is that, as we've heard, this crisis is a symmetrical crisis with asymmetrical consequences. And this goes for people too. Now, obviously, the more vulnerable members of our society are harder hit by this crisis. So, exclusion, poverty, inequalities, these are things which we are seeing more clearly than we did before. So we are going to have to react. In the past, we never had so many people having lost their jobs, very often not secure jobs, and these people have had to turn to food aid. Not just in the poorest countries in the EU, we're seeing this in the richest countries as well. And then the third side to all of this is investment in the human being, because we know that if the economy isn't going to go back to being identical to how it was before, then we're going to have to identify in people, we're going to have to invest in knowledge, in skills. And of course, this is very closely linked to change, and in particular to the Green Deal, which is absolutely essential, because jobs change. Some jobs are going to disappear. Of course, there's the digital transformation, but it can help us, but it'll also transform jobs as well. So all of this is part of this global response which the Commission presented yesterday. And as far as I'm concerned, there's a guiding line which links these texts, and that's the ideas focusing on social rights. So I think that implementing big reforms, large-scale transformations with the Just Transition form as well, involves applying everything linked to social rights. And that's something which will allow us to make our economies more resilient, but at the same time it'll make our societies more resilient. The aim of the package is solidarity. That's essential. Solidarity in the Union, its cohesion. I think that that's an important point for the Union, because the alternative is divisions, divergences, and that's a danger for the European Union. So it's convergence as well. Convergence is social, but it also has to be environmental, and it has to be economic as well, of course.
We are first in the emergency situation, and especially when we talk about employment, when we talk about poverty, we are in a situation of the emergency. And therefore, it's very important to have an immediate response. And the immediate response is REACT-EU, with its 55 billion of fresh funding. And with this funding, we can support the European Social Fund, but we can also increase the resources of the fund for European aid to the most deprived. That's what I said before, that more and more people have to rely on the actions of this fund and on different interventions, including food aid. The additional ESF resources have also to be used to support jobs and particularly to support youth employment. Because if there is one category of people who are under big threat in terms of jobs, it's the young. Because when companies are in such a difficult position, when they have no liquidity, well, they will not hire young people. And so we really have to act in favor of the young people. We have to support youth, and we have not, as it happened for the previous crisis, to wait 2 or 3 years before we act. We have to act immediately. And therefore it's very important, and this has been also stressed yesterday by the President of the Commission, we have to put into force a real plan to support jobs, to support youth employment. One aspect is certainly the youth guarantee. We have to strengthen it. But there is another aspect which seems to me very important, because a lot of companies cannot take young people for apprenticeships, for vocational training. Even in a big country, which is one of the countries where vocational training is very strong, I have heard that about 30% of young will not be taken by companies because just companies do not have the resources to do that. That would be a lost generation, because these young people would not have a good training, would not have a good education. And we will have a lack later on of qualified and skilled people, because this generation will not have got the training they need now. So we have really to put into place a system where we encourage, especially SMEs, which have been hit quite a lot by this crisis, to take and to give an opportunity to young people. So education and training and skills are key, but we also have to improve access to social services, and the health services have already been mentioned. Also, in terms of ESF Plus, I think there are two very important elements. First one is youth unemployment. I have already talked about that because we will increase the intervention of the ESF up to 15% for youth employment. And the second one is poverty, and especially poverty focused on children. So 5% of the expenses of the ESF should be focused on children, on child poverty, because very often we see that poor children, and this crisis has really revealed the dramatic situation of poverty among children, because when children do not go to school, they do not have meals. And this is a dramatic situation which has been shown in many countries. So the last point is transition, and I think here we will work very closely together. The green transition, the digital transition, the regions which will be affected by these transitions. How can we reskill people? How can we give them new opportunities for jobs? And so we will focus a lot on this issue, on skilling and reskilling and upskilling people. Thank you.
Merci.